Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. I do believe I see yes, we do see our panel online as well. And we're going to go ahead and get started. And we have our moderators, Ms. Dima, and who is virtual, but you know her, you see her, Miss Wumi. And if you ladies can introduce yourselves, and it is in your hands.
Great, thanks, Sharonda. Dima, do you want to start us off? Or shall
All right. Hi, everyone. I miss you guys. Usually I'm there in person with Wumi. Wumi, I miss you. I miss seeing your lovely face.
Miss you more.
And we are Sickle Sisters. And we are here today to not only do our panel, but we want to introduce our podcast, Through the Genes.
So, as Dima mentioned, on June 19th of this year, we launched a brand new podcast titled #Through the Genes that kind of highlights the risks, benefits, and limitations of cell and gene-based therapies. We created this podcast specifically for the patient and caregiver community because we felt like oftentimes in this space, with the new approval from FDA on gene therapy, we only see the success stories. We don't always see stories of patients that had an unsuccessful clinical trial. And so we developed this series in partnership with the National Human Genome Research Institute at the NIH. And Dima and I were the perfect hosts because if you don't know, I am 5 years post stem cell transplant, even though I still will always identify as a sickle cell warrior. And my beautiful sickle sister, Dima Hendricks, had to be taken out of her clinical trial protocol due to developing a blood clot in her heart. And so, what better way to introduce a podcast to a community than two sisters who have opposing views on topics around cell and gene-based therapies? We felt like we wouldn't do the community justice if we only depicted the success stories or we only showed how that impacts the patient and the caregiver's life. My lovely sister, Dima Hendricks, is a huge advocate for mental health. And so in season 1, we unpack the emotions, the identity crisis, the survivor's guilt that many transplant, I always say transformative therapies. I refuse to use the word curative therapy because it is not a finite cure. But many people don't often see the journey for most of us patients that are on the other side. We are still navigating a body that we don't know. For one, sometimes I wish I could go back to having sickle cell because at least I knew sickle cell. I knew her for 30 years and I've not known sickle cell for 5 years, but now my body is developing and doing things that it never did before. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to check out our podcast, I highly implore you. We're going to do a preview quickly. Go ahead, Dima.
Hey, Sickle family. I'm Wumi Bakari.
And I'm Dima Hendricks. And we would like to welcome you to the Through the Genes podcast,
where we talk about living, healing, recovering, and exploring curative therapies for sickle cell disease.
We will also talk about our individual curative therapy journeys and the bond that we built as Sickle Cell Sisters. It's Dima Hendricks, and today I'm joined by my beautiful sickle cell sister, Wumi Bakari. Wumi, say what's up to the people.
Hey, sickle family. Okay, first and foremost, people got to check out what's happening here. Why did we consider curative therapy?
In my experience, it was 2018, and it was the first time I was given an opportunity to potentially cure this disease. Now, if I rewind backwards, I decided to become a mother early because I thought I wasn't going to live past the age of 30.
He is not the same person that he was before. Like nothing about him is the same. His mental state is not the same. Prior to the trial, he was severely depressed, lots of anxiety, all understandable with what he was going through. Now, I mean, everybody has their own mental health that they are trying to work through, but that is not who he is or where he is today. He has this mental toughness about him.
Best way to explain it's like a yo-yo. You're constantly up and down because think of it, they take all of this blood out of you and then you're feeling weak and then they give you a blood exchange and then you're feeling strong again and then they take another bags of blood out of you and then they give you an exchange. You know, it's just constantly up and down and then you get to the chemotherapy, which was wild.
It's not just gene therapy or stem cell transplant that's not available in these countries. Treatments are not. Hydroxyurea is not available. Penicillin is not available. So
Who is the ideal patient coming into the trial? Because you have to be sick enough to get the gene therapy, but you can't be too sick that it would do something to your body or it will fail. So it's like it's like a tightrope. Who's the ideal?
You're right. Yes, you're right. It's like Goldilocks, too little, too much, just right.
Person down the line. And so to know that I played a small role in that, that's what I'm here for. And if I happen to benefit from it, that's the cherry on top. And so working with people that is the way they view life, I mean, it's so touching to me. I don't know if I can do that. Yeah, I'd be like, wait a minute, I need guarantees up front. I need to know right now.
Emphasize the health of the patient, but this is a recurrent question in the patient community is that for right now, is gene therapy only approved for people with hemoglobin SS, or are there some selective criteria for people with other types of sickle cell disease?
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's approved for S.
I understand you were Rumi's doctor during her procedure.
That's right.
Was she a good patient?
Yes. Yes. Of course, that's a loaded question, right? No, I'm just kidding. No, Rumi's terrific.
I want to know for someone who the transplant didn't work for, the curative therapy did not work for me. I didn't get that far into the process. Was your curative therapy journey, was it worth it? Was all of this going through the complications and still feeling pain, was it all worth it? I just want to know.
Okay.
All right. So as you can see, we already recorded our first season. We are wrapping up our first season, and our wonderful partners helped us achieve this podcast. So what's happening now is we want to move forward and have a second season. And season 2 is coming soon, but we're going to need your help. If anyone out there who's interested in sponsoring Through the Genes, please let us know. You can contact us, email us throughthegenes.com. You can email us at hello@throughthegenes. You can stay in touch with us using that QR code. But before, I just wanted to make sure that we had that out there. I hope you enjoyed the promo. I can't see you guys out there, which is making it really, really difficult. Can you see by a show of hands how many people have actually seen Through the Genes or heard of the podcast?
Sure. If you've heard of Through the Genes or you've had the privilege of watching one episode, can you raise your hands? Okay, in the room, girl, we only have about 6. So
come on, y'all.
It's not looking great, but I do want to use this opportunity. If you haven't heard about our podcast, to please give it a listen or a watch. I say this because oftentimes in this community, we say, You guys are creating things for us without us. We created this for warriors by warriors. And so there's a different way in which we tackle this conversation that I feel like listening to an episode as a warrior, you're like, you go, Dima, ask those hard questions. Because oftentimes we see them on panels and we have to filter our questions because we don't want to offend. And so on the podcast, we do unpack all of these intricate topics. But like my sickle sister Dima says, Season 1, we scratched the surface. Season 2, we're going a little bit deeper. And for us to fully realize that dream, we need your support. So all 7 episodes are available on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere you stream podcasts. And with that, I think we can move on to our global panel.
Yes.
Okay. So before we start our global panel, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit of my personal story with sickle cell disease, because I feel like oftentimes in this space, we don't fully recognize the global impact of sickle cell disease. And I can offer you some insight today that will bring your humanity forward in these types of conversations and urge you as warriors, allies, caregivers to add some extra push to these pharma companies to take these disease modifying therapies and curative therapies to other parts of the world where patients need it. So like I said before, my name is Wumi Bakare, and I am proudly Nigerian, born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. Don't worry, this accent is not mine. I have a Nigerian accent. But, because I've gone to school here, I've had to emulate your accent. So excuse me. But like I was saying before, so my story started, and this is a harrowing story. So if I take a couple of moments, know that it's because I'm pulling myself together. But I need to unpack this for you guys to really be able to understand how sickle cell disease is impacting those outside the US. So in 2010, I graduated from college and decided to move back to my home country of Lagos, Nigeria, to do something incredibly fearless, which was to start my own PR agency. Now, when I got into the country in 2010, about 5 months later, I had a vaso-occlusive crisis, one of many. I went to the clinic in my local community, and after having a fever of 102, for those that are African in the room, that's about over 40 degrees Celsius. Americans use Fahrenheit. My local clinic told my family, we're so sorry, we can't take care of your daughter anymore because we are treating her for sickle cell disease crisis and none of the medications seem to be working. Keep in mind, in my home country of Nigeria, we use a pain medication called pentazocine, which has been banned in Europe and the US, but we don't have access to morphine, Dilaudid, methadone, and many of the other pain medications that American patients have. And so when my parents took me out of that hospital, my mom asked, well, can you use an ambulance to take her to a private hospital? They said, madam, we don't have battery in the ambulance. So you have to take your daughter to the hospital by yourself. My parents wheeled me off to a private hospital. I was at the private hospital for about a week. And every day we were coughing out $500,000 naira. In dollars, that's about $2,000 a day. Now, even though my parents are very hardworking, we simply could not afford this. And at the private hospitals, they said, madam, we don't know what's going on. She's having an infection, and the chemical reagents we will use to test the blood products has expired. So we think you should take your daughter to a federal government hospital. So of course, my parents didn't want their child to die. So they took me to a federal government hospital, which is the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. I mentioned the name because I want to highlight that it is a teaching hospital. And as we know, if it's a teaching hospital, you have access to doctors in multiple different fields. You have access to labs. I was taken to this Luth, and then within my first 2 months, 8 patients died, all in my room. They didn't die because their illness could not be treated. They died because of medical negligence, because many of the nurses that were supposed to be watching their patients overnight were sleeping. So at the time, I, like many warriors, started to have suicidal thoughts, waiting for the angel of death to just come and take me. And then the doctors told my parents, because of the symptoms I was having, we think she's having kidney issues. So, Oga and Madam, which is just our way of saying Mr. and Mrs., go to the market and buy us a tube. And if you've ever had to buy gas in like a little keg, the tube they were asking my parents to buy is what you use to funnel petrol or gas from the jerry can into your trunk where you pump gas. So my mom and dad are bewildered and they're like, why are we buying a tube? And they said, because that's the way we will remove the infections from her kidneys. Then they asked my parents to buy diesel for the generator in the hospital because they couldn't do the surgery with torchlights or lantern. They had to have diesel. So my parents looked at each other and said, they will kill our daughter for us if we don't get her the hell out of here. We reached out to friends, family, were able to raise enough funds to take me abroad because at this time we were 3 months in and I had lost a total of 30 pounds. So I was withering away. We raised the funds and unfortunately I couldn't come back to the US even though that is where I had established care because I would not have made that 13-hour flight. I would have died on that plane. So instead, we ventured to London because from Lagos to London is just 6 hours. That flight felt like the end, but I pushed my hardest, prayed my hardest, and made it to London. At the time, because my parents couldn't afford for all of us to go, my brother was my caregiver. We get to London and we present the medical records we were given in Nigeria, only to find out I was given the records of a 75-year-old woman. So what the doctors were diagnosing me with were records that were not my own. Come to find out, what was going on was I had an infected port. When I was leaving to go back to my home country, I was very nervous, and my hematologist gave me 4 different port access needles to take with me. I didn't realize that the doctors in Nigeria didn't know how to access a port. Instead, they went on YouTube. And that's how my port was accessed, and that's how it was infected. Now, in the UK, I didn't have any medical history there, so they had to do all the tests from scratch. And then they said, we need to take out your port. I asked the doctors, I don't respond to lidocaine well, so I would really appreciate it if you give me a double dose of lidocaine when you take me to the OR. They didn't listen. So every slice, every tug, every pull of that port I felt. It is a level of trauma that I will never be able to shake. But that was my lived experience. I share that story with you today because I have gotten care on 3 continents across 8 different countries. I don't say that as a flex. I say that because the healthcare disparities that exist outside the US are insane. And so if my well-educated parents were able to provide me with a means to leave the country, I am forever grateful and indebted to them. But that my story is not the same for those who all they have is the continent of Africa. So in the US, hydroxyurea is the standard of care treatment. In my home country, if you are under the poverty line, they don't tell you hydroxyurea exists. So I say all this to say, this conversation about the global impact of sickle cell disease is super important. I am not opening up because I just want to share my story. I'm opening up because in my advocacy, I often ask the hard questions, which is posing to pharmaceutical companies, when are you going to West Africa? My country has 4 to 6 million people with sickle cell disease. America has 100,000 and growing, whereas America is much larger than my home country. So when you see patients in other countries, if you're a CBO organization, you see them sending you a DM asking for funds, it's not because we're trying to scam you, it's because we're in dire need. And so with that today, I want to introduce this amazing panel. Biba is a force to be reckoned with, but not only is she's also my fellow West African sister. She's from Niger, I'm from Nigeria. And of course, Mr. Shoyoye is a fellow Nigerian. So I would like you guys to please talk to us today about the global impact of sickle cell disease, starting again with Biba, who has the privilege to be able to juxtapose care in Niger and care in Canada.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's just makes both of us emotional to listen to your story and what you've been through, because we've all, experienced something similar. So, as you said, I came from sub-Saharan Africa too. I was born and raised in Niger. The only difference between you and I is that my country was colonized by the French. We speak French, and you're by the British and you speak English. So that's the only, but we're the same people, same culture, same religion, everything, just a border that was made by the colonizer. So when my son was born when my son was born about 36 years ago, my son is now 36 years old. He's a young adult living with sickle cell disease. It was not a diagnosis, it was a death sentence that was handed to us. They told me he was going to die, simple. And the only thing that they were doing is that they told me, take him home, take care of him, love on him as long as you have him. And that's all. I think not a healthcare provider like a nurse, a doctor, nothing else saved that child, but only the fact that I was a young mom. When you're young, you have hope. You have this, you trust life. I find the adult world to be very pessimistic. I'm like, they don't know what they're doing. This boy can die. So I did everything I could, everything I was told to do. I did. And I'm telling you, that's what saved that boy. Because when a doctor tells me I need blood, I will go in the community and find people to come and donate blood, because it's not the same system. You get the blood for your family members. The hospital doesn't get the blood for you. I was 19 when I was going into the community, trying to convince people to come and donate blood. And in exchange, the blood bank will keep the blood my son needs in case he has a crisis. And I remember I was still in school, so I wasn't working. I only had a scholarship. It was the equivalent of $100 a month. But yet the doctor will give me prescription that will take $20 to $30 out of it. So I have to survive with the rest. But I have my family. We are community people, right? So what I realized at the time is that in Africa, what we had was supportive care. What is supportive care? They had blood, they had immunization, antibiotics, and that's it. And then fast forward, when my son was about 15, we moved to Canada. And I'm like, okay, because they told me he was gonna die. I was able to keep him alive till he turned 15. We moved to Canada. I'm like, I saw hope. I really saw a difference in the care, right? So they start taking care of him. He had 3 years growth delay, always in pain crisis, frequent hospitalization. They did control all that. They put him on the blood transfusion for a year, but guess what happened? Then I start seeing that they were the same unmet need for our community. So they still had the same thing: painkillers, antibiotics, immunization. Yes, blood exchange, different than blood transfusion, but still blood. Then I asked them, are you gonna cure him? They said no. So at the time they couldn't, they needed a full sibling to be a match, and my son did not have any full siblings. My other kids, well, have siblings. So they said, no, we don't even try, forget about it. And he's too old, he was 15. So he has to live with sickle cell disease. So that's when I realized that the impact of sickle cell disease is the same wherever you live. Either you're in America or in Africa, it's the same. Pain, chronic pain, and sickle cell complication. You have it regardless of where you live. Emotional distress and psychological, strain. Wherever you live, you have it. Now the delay in access to education and employment is the same wherever you live. The difference here in America, you have great advancement, right? You have more support for the pain management. You have a better pain management protocol. And now research is happening here, not in the rest of the world. And I have to tell you, someone said here in the presentation that 1,000 babies were born daily in Africa with sickle cell disease. And I want to share with you that 1,024 people die daily, globally, from sickle cell disease. So that means, and the majority of them are from the African continent, or maybe let's say South India, like in India, right? So people are not surviving to get to the age where I've seen people here being 50, 60, 70 and older. So the global impact of sickle cell is a silent crisis in the Black community, because we are the one who are, affected mostly by this disease. I'm gonna stop here and we're gonna continue the discussion later.
Mr. Sharia, do you want to add anything? We also have virtually Shifnees, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from the Maldives. And so if you would like to share a few of your thoughts about the global impact of sickle cell disease.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm from Maldives, but I reside in Malaysia with my kids. I was diagnosed at the age of 2, like the stories I've heard. I didn't know what sickle cell can do to my body until the age of 14. So I have sickle beta thalassemia. And my first crisis was at the age of 14, where even though my parents knew I carry sickle cell and thalassemia gene, they didn't know what to expect. And as we have spoken before, like, it's known to be a childhood disease, but it's no longer a childhood disease. And yet we see so much difficulty and challenges to achieve the proper treatment that we need to get to survive beyond the age of, adulthood, like transition from pediatrics to adulthood and to older age. I started taking hydroxyurea back in 2002, and I'm still on hydroxyurea, and I have had 3 different pregnancy experiences with hydroxyurea, and I had 2 kids. One is 15 and one is 10. And so I think as we age, we are facing different types of challenges in terms of health, which we are never being advised or given advices to, even check. But whatever happens with age, it's always blamed on sickle cell. And where I come from, we have the highest prevalence of beta thalassemia carriers in the world. But although we have sickle cell carriers, the data is not enough to say, not given importance in our country as much as we would like to. So when I went through my first crisis, I was held in the hospital, asking whether I was pregnant because my tummy was bloated. I was in severe pain. So they made me wait until they test for pregnancy before they gave me any pain treatment. Later, when my parents discussed about bone marrow transplant, I was told, I'm much older now. It's not safe to have a bone marrow transplant, so better manage your disease. And when I wanted to when I got married and wanted to have kids, I was discouraged from having a family because they wanted me to focus on my health instead of, go chase my dreams. So regardless of all these challenges, I think I've overcome so far, been married 20 years. My kids, one has sickle cell trait, the other one has thalassemia trait. And my experience with hydroxyurea in pregnancy is that I stopped hydroxyurea for my son, and I went through blood transfusion and complications of iron overload. And the next pregnancy, I continued hydroxyurea from conception until birth, and my babies are doing well. So my part of advocating is regarding patient rights, where we get to choose what we want to do with our treatment. Discouraging patients just because we have sickle cell is unfair for us, because so many patients that I've met across the globe doesn't even realize that they can live pretty normal life if we are given the proper treatment and if we are like educated on how to manage ourselves. So my last crisis was back in 2020, and I have not had a crisis since. And I've been free from hospital and I'm doing pretty well with regard to my health. So it's I applaud the work that you are doing, Dima, and because through genes, I've also understood that everyone thinks bone marrow transplant, stem cell transplant, and all this gene therapy is the perfect,
Solution.
cure. And every time we try to explain to the parents that their kids needs to be healthy in order to receive these treatments, they feel like we are trying to discourage from, like we're trying to break their dreams of becoming cured. So I've seen those who have gone through bone marrow transplant regardless of their health situation. And then we've lost so many of our own warriors in Maldives to bone marrow transplant before. So I guess I'm here if you need to ask any further questions to discuss about it. So one of the reasons I moved is because I needed a better healthcare system for myself. That's why I moved here to Malaysia, even though Malaysia doesn't have much of sickle cell patients in the country.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, because it adds a bit more color to not just the African and Afro-Caribbean story, but also to people from your ethnicity who we don't see a lot of in this community when it comes to diversity and ethnicity. Now, Mr. Shoye, I want to ask this. In a lot of cultures, family, community play a huge role in how we navigate society. And so I want to ask you now, what role has your family played in the management of your sickle cell disease?
Before I answer that, hello, my name is Muiwa. Wumi. Bawoni. You triggered me, oh.
Oh.
Mabinu. You almost had a grown man up here crying.
Not my intent.
Well, I'm gonna answer your question. The role of my family, right now I'm married to an American woman, my kids were born here. The role of them is different than family back home. I was born in Nigeria, and being born in Nigeria, I was dead. Literally, I was dead. They told my mom, why bother? They told my mom that it was me and my older sister. So I'm not the only one with sickle cell. They told my mom there is no reason for you to keep trying. When I was still young, I was still there. We had paracetamol, Panadol, and we had the balm. It's like a tiger balm. Still triggers me till today. The smell of that balm. You go into a pain crisis, there ain't no oxycodone, there ain't no methadone. It was my mom rubbing that balm on me through the night, nonstop, because there was nothing. They give you chloroquine.
Yes.
I don't know if y'all heard about chloroquine during the pandemic, that they were like, oh, it's so dangerous. And that was my daily thing. They put that chloroquine in you. I don't know what is worse, the pain crisis or the chloroquine going into your body, and it was crazy with my family. I still don't talk to most of my family back home. Let me tell you how deep it goes. My father remarried when we moved down here. My father had 3 other children that does not have sickle cell, because we were not supposed to be here. We were not supposed to make it. He went and started his whole life. He started, with someone else, because he had 2 children with my mom that had sickle cell. It is a very, very touchy subject with me, but I'm happy to share with you guys. I don't talk to really. I see them, I pass by, I say hello. I respect, you know how it is. I respect my family, but I was canceled. So since I was canceled, me and my sister just stay our way. But my family down here, my sister is down here. I have a wife. I have 3 beautiful kids. 2 of them has sickle cell SS. They're living their best life. Daddy knows. Daddy know how you feel. Daddy know what he has to do. Daddy know what to do to carry on. We don't need that part of the family because I knew what I went through. And it made us stronger.
It did.
It made us stronger. We are unlike no other person in this world because we know what the pain feel. When I first met my doctor down here, he asked me, "Oh, what can we do for the pain?" I'm like, "Dude, forget the pain. I live with the pain without medication. Stop the fatigue." You know, stop the fatigue. What do you mean the pain? You know, I could deal with the pain, but fatigue will have you waking up thinking this is it. You know, like you're not gonna make it when you gotta use the bathroom and you could barely get up to go use the bathroom. It's scary, you know. But I'm thankful. You know, my wife had a trait. We already in love before we found out she had the trait. We already, you know, but I will not switch her for anybody without a trait. You know, she always had my back. So yeah, that's, you know, my family dynamic with
Of
the whole
course.
thing.
I think to add a bit more color and context to what Muyiwa just said is, so sickle cell disease is very demonized, weaponized, stigmatized disease. I can speak to Nigeria. I don't want to speak to all of Africa, but in my country, my mom didn't tell her siblings I had sickle cell until 5 years ago when I had my transplant and I was fundraising. And it's because the minute people know, they never look at you the same way. There's a pity, and I think all warriors can identify with that and say, we don't really want your pity, we want your compassion. And so what Mayowa was speaking to is the fact that we say the most, and Nigerians were very direct. If you know any Nigerian, you can test, it's a testament to who we are as people. We say it like it is. And so growing up, the minute we are born, in hospitals, doctors are not taking our parents aside. They're literally, I vividly remember the doctor telling my mom, she won't leave past 16. For a child, hearing, understanding, it's a lot to digest. And so sometimes in African families, you notice tension, or in my case, shame. Because if my parents never shared with their loved one that I had sickle cell disease, then did that mean they were ashamed to say I was theirs and this is what I lived with? But I think you have to understand the community and the culture in which we grew up in. And that speaks to a lot of the reasons why we navigate life in the way we do. I genuinely don't think it's coming from a bad place. I respect and love my culture, which is why I started by saying I'm proudly Nigerian. However, I don't really like how we handle things. It's in the same way we use the term sickler. There's nowhere you go. Even till today, my mom will say, "Oh, I didn't know that person was a sickler." And I'm like, "Madam, that word cuts the way the N word cuts. Let's not do that." And this is from someone that her daughter is an advocate, so she should know better, right? But that's just how it's perpetuated on the African continent. But now, Biba, I wanted to ask you and pivot a little bit. How do schools and educational institutions accommodate children with sickle cell disease? If you can juxtapose your experience in Niger and juxtapose your experience in Canada, what are some of the differences that exist in terms of schools being accommodating to warrior children?
Yes. So first of all, let me get back to what both of you shared here. The issue is, you know, the stigma that surrounds, you know, any type of disease that you have when in Africa, because it is not seen like something that can come from your, you know, genes. It's always somebody's fault. When a Black person is sick, you know, like that's the sister-in-law who did it to my child, yes. Or, you know, it's something that has been sent to me by the enemies, the frenemies, the neighbor, everybody is, you know, so that culture create what, you know, you both have been through. And the rejection that you face, you know, is part of the stigma that we all experience in the Black community. I remember also I think when I had my child, as I told you, I was a young mom. My family didn't want me to disclose that I had a child with sickle cell because who is going to marry you, right? Because you are a woman, you only bring sick kids. But you have to understand that for a child to have sickle cell, both parents have to be carriers, right? So that's also an issue. So we see things, it's culture, it's just, the way we operate is different. But I've also seen other type of stigma here, in North America that I'm like, okay, so we don't do that in Africa, right? So I understand that. So I had to say that, while it's very sad and what you experience is with your mother, not speaking to her, like telling her loved one, I think she still loves you, but it's just that she is living, the way everybody lives, right? We hide a disease. So my thing to tell those parents is like, so imagine the pain of sickle cell. If you are a woman who have ever given birth, the pain of childbirth, you're asking a child to go into family gathering and hide that they have such a painful crisis experience. You have to be human, right? So I'm sorry again, but it is what it is. That's why we educate, we raise awareness to change things now for others coming behind us. Now, education system, there are no accommodation for people living with sickle cell disease to this day in Africa. That's why I live in Canada. When I come to America, do you know what is amazing to me? When I hear warriors here standing, and some of them are doctors, they've achieved higher education, they have PhDs, and I'm like, I went back to Canada, I remember, and I had a meeting with the community leaders, and I told them, I don't know how they do it. How come we don't have that even in Canada? And guess what? Do you know what they told me? What the Canadian warriors told me? They said, Miss Biba, in America, they have no choice but to do that. Because these people, the Black in Canada, in America, have been through so much with slavery. And now they need to get an education. And also for them to even, they have to fight for themselves. So they need that education. That's why the warriors are standing up to do it for themselves. And in Canada, we do have healthcare system. And a warrior told me, we have healthcare system here. So I know they will take care of me, so I don't need even to do more to have access to care. So that is what makes you become a stronger advocate. When you have unmet need, you stand up and you fight for yourself. Now, I look at the education system. When my son went to school in Africa, he would miss about 50 days of school per year, which is about 2 months and a half. He had to repeat, he did repeat some classes in Africa. And when we got to Canada, the difference was that they will give him some accommodation to be able to take a test if he misses it. They will be maybe willing to give him a chance, right? To have extra time if he needs to submit an assignment if he was away. But that's about it. All the accommodation were made by the family. We have to do it for ourselves. I had to take, people to come at home to give him, some classes if he's missing class, and I had to pay for that. There is no organization taking care of the education of people with sickle cell disease. So we have to applaud those in this room who are standing and being able to achieve, education and then also maintain a job. Because when my son went to school, graduated, and then got a job, now when he started missing work, then he lost his job. Right. So you have again to advocate to how do we support, how do we accommodate them wherever they live. And I've seen so many in Africa who are jobless. And then they fall into depression because the family doesn't help them, does not support them, because they become adults and they are a burden to their own families. And then they die at an early age. Sometimes it's just neglect, right? And feeling maybe left down by their own, loved ones. So it's a sad thing. But the thing is, we have as a community to find solution. How do we change that for ourselves? And conversation like this brings the solution. Conversation like this, us sitting together and saying, no one should be left behind. I think whatever you have in America here, we need to advocate for it to be available for people regardless of their geographical position. You have Endari in America, right? You have access to the new drugs from Adakveo and Oxbryta. I don't have them in Canada yet. None of them is available in Canada. Gene therapy has been approved in America, not approved in Canada yet. We have a submission from Vertex recently at Health Canada, and I'm hoping that it's going to be approved. So just to show you the difference, it's just across the border, and we don't have access to all this. So left alone Africa or remote Africa, they don't even have newborn screening.
Yes.
They don't have access to proper pain management protocol. How are they going to survive when the temperature goes to over 40 degrees, right? Hydration can't help you, like the chloroquine you're taking is for malaria. That's all. It doesn't treat sickle cell pain. It doesn't treat the fatigue. It doesn't treat the emotional trauma that you have. Nothing, right? They're rubbing your body with all this. I don't even think it helps because the pain is inside your bones. So it's just, there is so much left to do.
Yes.
And the only way out, I will tell you, we need to set global priorities to agree that these are the set priorities globally. We need to work together. If we all stand together, one, and become united, let's say we say next June 19, every single patient advocacy group is going to advocate to get newborn screening. I know we have it in America. We also have it in Canada. They have it in the UK. But in India, in Africa, they don't. So let's advocate for it. We start with that. Then we want everybody to get hydroxyurea. We advocate for it. We get it. You're going to see a change. You're going to see people be able to have, to thrive and have a better life. But unless we come together and unite and work together, it is not going to happen.
That's true.
Nobody's going to do it for us.
Wumi, my dear, can I ask a question?
Sorry?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt, but this question may be kind of exposing my privilege a little bit. Although I live in the state of Massachusetts and we have far medical advances in the state, I also live in a city that is maybe 2 hours away from receiving quality sickle cell care. And not just in my city, but there's the surrounding areas that don't have access because everyone is populated. All of the sickle cell hospitals are populated in Boston. So I want each of you to speak to the access in your home country. How far do you have to go? What does that look like?
Can I go first?
You can go first.
Okay, so I'm going to, thank you so much for these questions. I'm going to address it and I'm going to just speak about first Africa. I did not own a car when we were living there. I had to take a taxi, and you share the taxi with other people, which is exposing your child to, other infections or something. So I remember how many times did I had to just pick up my child, stand up, on the road, and then take a taxi and take him to the hospital. But the city wasn't that big. It's not like, here, LA. So we will get to the emergency room on time, which there was no emergency room. To the hospital.
I was going to say that we don't
There's
have
no
that.
emergency room, but to the hospital and then see a doctor because there was one pediatrician for all the kids in the hospital. So this is what it was, right? So it was on me to get to the care center to get care for him. Now, in North America, in Canada, this is what I realized. So the quality standards of care that, that was put in place by the Canadian hematologist says that when a sickle cell crisis starts, you have to receive care within the first, the 30 minutes so that they can control the crisis, right? So that you can get back on your feet faster. But the thing is, the majority of people affected by sickle cell disease in Canada are Black, and Black people don't live downtown. They live a minimum of an hour away from the place where they receive care. So I went to the doctors and I said, do you guys know that? And sometimes some of them have to call a friend because they don't want to call an ambulance because they can't afford to pay for the charges. So they have to call somebody or a parent will drive. And in Canada, we have snow. Sometimes during winter, -20, you're afraid to drive and something. So they will stay home and manage the crisis. And that's how we lost many young adults trying to self-manage their crisis at home. And this is one thing that we need. This is the importance of data. We don't have sickle cell registries. So you see, when we sit in this type of conferences, you hear stories, very impactful stories. We have many of them, but they just die here in this room because yes, we're gonna support each other, but we have to be able to share our stories in a way that is gonna turn into data that we can use to advocate, with the government, the policy makers, so that it can translate into better care. Meaning that if the government knows where we live, there is no way there's gonna put the hospital where we have to receive care 2 hours away. But only a registry can show that the number of patients, it can show where we live and the quality of the care we are receiving. And that's why I said every single cell, like a sickle cell group, should advocate to have a registry. In Canada, that's the first thing I started. When I became a president, I told them we need a sickle cell registry in Canada because cystic fibrosis, for example, 4,300 people living with cystic fibrosis in Canada, they've had a registry for 40 years. And we have over 6,000, now almost 9,000 people living with sickle cell disease in Canada. We do not have a sickle cell registry. As a matter of fact, I have to run out of this meeting today because I'm going to speak to Canadian hematologists. They're having a meeting and we are introducing the physician who is not a hematologist, but a specialist, a respiratologist who agreed to work on the sickle cell registries because the hematologists did not have time. They said they were too busy to do that. So today we're trying to get their buy-in to come and join the registry and work on it so that we can expand it nationwide. I did it with just a specialist who has about 350 patients in her clinic. So you understand that this is access to care, and this is how also it's an inequity done to our community. You put the care 2 hours away knowing that we have no way to get there, and you tell us we have to see you within the first 30 minutes when the crisis starts. It's impossible sometimes to achieve for the patient community. And many of them suffer in silence or die in silence because they can't have access to care. So we need to change that.
Yeah. Dima, I can speak to Nigeria. So difficulties in access to care in Nigeria it's a lot. It's cumulative. And by that, I mean, if you're not dealing with armed robbers on the road, when you're even trying to go to the hospital, because my crisis was, she likes to pop up at 4 a.m. I don't know why. But so what my mom would do is the same thing Muyiwa's mom would do, which is she would take, when it says Tiger Balm, it's like Bengay, but a more vicious, strong Bengay. And so she will just massage. I will cry every hour on the hour, and she would massage until day broke so that there was a reduced chance of meeting armed robbers on the road. Besides that, we also, even though Nigeria we have oil, we are exporting our oil. Our leaders are corrupt. And
you're not exporting the oil. Developed countries are still have their hands on us, and they are taking our resources to bring it to their countries, and they're paying us like way less than we're supposed to get. If you can Google a country named Niger, where I come from, we just kick France out. And we also kick I'm sorry to say, we also kicked America out of the country. We asked them to leave, right? Because we're gonna now export our uranium, and they start selling it to China and to the Russian. So, to Russia, which is another story, because now the money is gonna come so that we can build our own countries. So that's the reality.
That's the reality.
And that is a system that is built to keep us again, to marginalize us. Right? The same way African American are being marginalized here, we still have a system there continuing to marginalize Black people in their own countries.
Yes.
So that's the thing. So we don't export. They take it away from us.
With clarification from Biba, in essence, there's no petrol to get to the clinic. And in my city, I grew up in Lagos, which is the commercial city of Nigeria. It's with 6 billion people, it's a lot. It's densely populated. But for most people on average, to get to a hospital that is familiar with sickle cell disease can take between 1 to 2.5 hours.
I'm from Abeokuta.
Oh,
Jesus. I know Abeokuta.
Yes. So there you
go.
go.
Abeokuta is in Ogun State, which is where I'm from originally. But yes, again, it's a lot of distance. But I think also to speak to access to care is, what are we even using for care? We're using Panadol, which is equivalent to Tylenol. And then we're using a pain medication that has been banned from Europe and the US still to treat sickle cell disease to date. And then sometimes if your family is from a low-income household, they will ask you to bring the IV fluid, buy it from the market and bring it with you. So I don't want to compare apples to oranges, but there are significant limitations that are impacting people abroad. Shifnez, I'm going to let you speak to access to care in Maldives or Malaysia.
Sickle cell in Maldives exists as pockets across the country. We are an island nation, so we have around 1,000 and more islands across the country where we find pockets. So the first time I came to know of another sickle cell warrior is when I was 29 years old. So all the time I grew up thinking I was the only one with sickle cell disease. We didn't have a hematologist growing up. We still don't have a stationed hematologist in the country, but we do have a blood service center where thalassemia patients do get their treatments from. But whenever we have a crisis, we need to go to government hospitals, and when I started having sickle cell crisis, nobody, even the doctors, were not aware of sickle cell. What was causing my pain, they had no idea. And I was given multiple painkillers to manage the pain, but the root cause of the pain was never identified. And now, until last 2 years ago, we had only 18 sickle cell patients in the registry. But this is, I feel like sickle cell is an invisible disease in the country. We are a minority that is considered like doesn't exist until we come into the hospital with a crisis. So compared with the time when I was having crisis for the first time and until now, I think things have gotten better, but still there's not enough data to say patients are surviving beyond the age. I myself is 41, and we have a couple of patients who are at 40, but most of them are young ones, but those who pass through, 20s to 30s, they do have more complications than I have ever had. I was lucky enough that my parents could take me abroad to India or Sri Lanka whenever I had a crisis for treatment. So that's how I survived. We survived through trial and error and not through any healthcare provider in Maldives.
Thank you for that. If you notice, one thing rings through. Muyiwa left Abeokuta to come to the US. I left Lagos to come to the US. Shifnez left Maldives to go to Malaysia. Are you seeing a trend? The trend is because as warriors and being born into this disease, we need to find a way out, which is the reason why I feel like global collaborations are so important, because in as much as Americans have their own fight against systemic racism and implicit bias, we also have a different fight that we're fighting, and I feel like we are stronger together. So with that, I'm going to segue to Kiwanuka. Thank you for joining us. He is broadcasting live from Uganda. And so I'm gonna let you kind of wrap things up by helping us to elaborate on what type of global collaborations would you like to see between the US and the rest of the world when it comes to care. You're on mute. You are muted.
Hello, everyone.
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've been yearning to see that I talk to you about the disease in my country, Uganda. And unfortunately, last year I missed the session because of time. You know, in Uganda and in the States, time wasn't favoring me, but this time round, I tried my level best to be here. So we've gotten so many problems with people, mostly in Uganda, that are suffering of sickle cell disease, whereby in Africa, we don't have the governments that can help all or everyone to get medication, to be vaccinated, either to get advocacy, get trainings on how they can end the disease. So if we come up with ideas, because that I was trying to connect with some different people in the States so that they can try to be helping with either medication to the people in the country. But of course, it's not all about giving medication, but even curbing the disease on how to train people. We come up with trainings in schools, in universities, because that's what we do right now in universities and schools. Train people, teach them on how they can prevent it, how they can get to know their status before they get the disease. So if at all we come up with trainings, it will be very easy for us to end the disease, because if at all someone has gotten to know that the other one is a sickler or the other one has the disease, it will be helpful so that they cannot combine to come up with another person that is infected. So my request is to see that we can come up with so many summits and organizing conferences in Uganda and in different places. Let's assume we can go to different schools if we can get people that can help us with medication for treatment, because right now in Uganda, if you're to count, there are very few people that can do bone marrow bone marrow transplant. So it is very expensive that even to get hydroxyurea in hospitals, it's for those people that can at least raise the money. But of course, we end up losing people. Very many kids are dying every day because they don't have money to access the medication. So if we can at least get people, because we've gotten some people that can help us with some medication, but also it's not enough. And that's how we can come up to help one another, mostly in Africa, because Africans, most of the time, we are out of knowledge because we are not used to see things. I'm getting this opportunity to talk to you, but of course, among the people in my community, I may be the only one that can access you. So if at all we can bring this kind of information to people down in the communities, it will be very helpful.
Thank you. What a really great way for us to wrap up this conversation. I think global collaborations are so important, and I want to strongly urge every CBO, every warrior that is in the room, that let's work together. Anything you guys, any models you are creating for the US, I ask that we reach out, spread our tentacles wider to people in other regions so we can collaborate on those models as well. But Shifney's, Kiwanuka, Biba, Muyiwa, it was such a pleasure to moderate this conversation. I am inspired, enamored, and incredibly grateful for your time with us this morning. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And with that, I have to call my Kenyan sister Eunice to the stage.
Oh, and Wumi, we heard the accent.
What happened?
I said, we heard the accent the whole time.
No, the accent is there. I'm not going to lie, it's there. It's just sometimes when Americans start speaking, I now flip. It's like code switching. You know what I mean?
Back and forth, yes.
In college, I was so tired of hearing, can you say that again? I was like, oh, Jesus. Okay, fine.
Come on, just say it.
Okay, Eunice wants to stand. Let's give her a round of applause.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining in the world. So as you've heard, my name is Eunice Achieng Owino. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I've been living with sickle cell SS for the past 43 years. So I always say I'm 43 years young. And living with sickle cell in Africa is difficult. And we try. So my policy is usually live a day at a time and enjoy life. Because with sickle cell, 1 minute we are happy here dancing, the next minute you're crying, you're in pain, you're in crisis, and your day is spoiled. So my journey with sickle cell began in terms of advocacy, began 10 years ago. As they're preparing my slides, I'll be waiting. But my journey with sickle cell started 10 years ago. And I remember I had to go through the process, reason being I had to do a total hip replacement. And going through the hip replacement, it was a journey like 12 years before doing the replacement, because every doctor I saw, every orthopedic hospital I went to, they told me you're too young to get a hip replacement. But nobody actually will tell you that you have AVN because of sickle cell. So you can imagine every morning I'll wake up, I want to go to work, my hip will lock and I'll fall down. I'll have to stay there until it turns back again so that I can wake up and do what I need to do. So being in that position, and I was employed and making a lot of money for my boss told me, you need to get a permanent solution. And the permanent solution was to do a total hip replacement, which again, I saw a doctor for like 2 years, my physician, hematology physician, and he told me, yeah, you need to take the hip replacement. So I decided to do a plan in my head. I didn't involve God. And I told God, I didn't tell God, I said, let me look for a husband. If I get a child before doing the hip replacement, it will make more sense, right? Because I was like, when you have a total hip replacement, you can't get babies. And I didn't get anyone. So here I am, I turned 33 and I needed to do a total hip replacement. And I told God, let your will be done. I didn't tell my family I was going in for a major surgery. I just told them, I'm going in, I'll come out. And when I went through the surgery, after coming back, they were like, you went through a whole hip replacement surgery and now is when you're coming back. So we thank God in everything. It's 10 years again since I did my hip replacement, because I did my hip replacement 2014. And now I'm 10 years into hip replacement and I'm enjoying it. And it has enabled me to do anything I need to do. I can wear heels, I can dance, I can go. There's a challenge that we do in Kenya. It's called Anguka Nayo. You go down, down, down until you reach down. So I can do that. So I was telling my friend from Nigeria that, okay, the big one. Okay, so yeah. So that's why I'm happy today to be here. It's been a long 10 years journey to actually be able also just to be able to have an organization. So my organization is called Sickle Cell Uhuru Trust, where I am a founder. And also I have a co-founder who is also a sickle cell warrior. And we founded this organization, reason being we found there's a huge gap where when you reach teenagehood, you're being forced to see a physician who does not understand your story. And majority of sickle cell patients will stop going to the hospitals because of that. And I'll just tell you guys about who we are, what we have faced for the past 10 years, how our journey has been. And for those who don't know where Kenya is, That's where Kenya is. And Kenya is a very beautiful country. You can see we are surrounded with our East African countries like Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Sudan, Somali. Those are all our neighbors. So I reside in Nairobi, which is one of the main, in the states, you call them states, but us, we call them counties. So in Kenya, we have 17 counties affected with sickle cell, according to our Ministry of Health. That's what they say, because sickle cell is associated with malaria. So everywhere there's a lot of malaria, you'll always find people living with sickle cell, a lot of them. And 10 years ago, I met this beautiful soul, Dr. Raleigh. She came to Nairobi, and that time I had just quit my work. I didn't know what I'm going to do next, because after being told you need to get a permanent solution for your hip, I went, did the surgery, came back to work 3 months after the surgery, and they told me they can't employ me again because I'm walking on 4 legs. I went out with 2 legs, they came back with 4 legs, and they thought I wouldn't perform. And it was such, so that was the first time discrimination hit me on my face, like, whoa. And I'm like, because I grew up in a loving family, and none of them, even my own doctor, never told me that I could not do anything. Because in Kenya, you're told there's a list of do nots. There's no list of yes, you can. We don't have that. So when I entered advocacy, we had to do that. And through this meeting, meeting Dr. Caroline made me realize, I believe this is where God has called me, just to save lives and talk and teach. And we had a very lovely session, and that was 10 years ago when I met her. And since 10 years ago, she's been coming to Kenya every single year apart from COVID. Yeah, and last year is again when we met again in Kenya. So who we are, basically, we are an organization founded by people living with sickle cell disease. And our aim is just to advocate, educate, and also just make sure that people get diagnostics that they need to also understand, and also treatment, what they need to do at home, because we are not really privileged to have everything. So whatever we have is what we use. What we do a lot is awareness and education, especially the adult warriors who, I remember when we walk in the office of the Ministry of Health, they ask us, you mean you people exist? So majority of us were supposed to die, but because they don't have data again, what Biba said, in Africa, we don't have data of how many people are born with sickle cell and how many die to sickle cell disease. And also we do a lot of support groups, peer support network, and also assist financially wherever we can. That's why we also work with a lot of partners. We also try and make sure that our voices matter when policies are being made about us. We also improve in access in terms of health. We advocate a lot, and also we work with a lot of researchers. So it's usually very funny that when these gene therapies are being now approved in America, the research actually happens in Kenya and a lot of Africa countries. We are we call ourselves like the rats. We are the rats who they'll come, try and use these drugs, and also will it work? Then now they come back and make it approved here, but now we can't afford it back home again. So they use us a lot. Yeah, so a lot of challenges that we face in terms of doing advocacy in my country is we lack a lot of awareness, because reaching 17 states or 17 counties sometimes is very hard. And that's why what we have done, our model is to try and raise as many other warriors to come out and speak about their stories and take control of all others, the 17 areas, because it's really huge. And then also sometimes just accessing ER. We don't have ER, because the ER we have is, they want to see your pain. Sickle cell, we don't show our pain. It is not written on my face that, yes, I have sickle cell. The pain that emergency will really take in Kenya is if you're bleeding, if you've been cut, if you have a gunshot wound, that one they'll take care of you very fast. But for sickle cell, no, nobody will take care of you very fast. Again, we don't get the medication. Access to medication is too expensive. And I don't know why that is, but in families where we have sickle cell patients, you'll find that you have 3 or 4 siblings who are living with sickle cell. So meaning accessing those drugs for that family is very expensive, and majority are living beyond $1 a day. So it's really hard, and that's why we need to really advocate to get free medication to each family. Access to just even simple care sometimes is very hard. If we don't work very hard as an organization to help these people to get their health insurance, they usually don't go to the hospitals. They'll try and buy few medication over the counter. And then something again, the insurance company always call us that we have a pre-existing disease, so they can't cover. When it comes to lessons learned, yes, community engagement is very key, especially from the rural areas to the urban towns. And then partnership, that is what also we've been thriving on, and doing collaboration, especially with the healthcare providers, so that they can understand how to care for us better. When it comes to advocacy, we try as much as we can to make sure our voices are heard, and then making sure that we are involved in a lot of research and data collection. And also we try as much as possible that we make sure that World Sickle Cell Day is marked in Kenya, World Patient Day is marked in Kenya, and also Sickle Cell Awareness Month, we are very active in all those days. Some of the milestones we have achieved as an organization, you can see we support over 1,500 families. That means we take care of their health insurance, making sure they have medication, making sure that they are being followed up with a healthcare provider in all those 17 counties. And also, as much as we try, we really want to try and reach to over 20,000 people as an organization, so that our voices are really amplified. Yeah, so again, sickle cell awareness events, we have organized a lot of events in Kenya to make sure that our voices are really heard. And also we reach out and collaborate with as many people as we can. And also we did a fundraising the other day as we're marking 10 years. So our aim was, again, support 100 patients to be able to access health, be given the health insurance, and also medication for a year. So once you do that, at least you know this child or this family will be able to concentrate their money to other things in terms of diet, how they can eat, and also how they can improve their lives. So what next for us? We just want to, again, expand our patient support, strengthen our advocacy and campaign, and clinical trials so that we are involved, our voices. We always say there's nothing for us without us being in the table, because if all of us are cured with sickle cell, then the medical healthcare will not have anything to do. So that's why our voices really matter. And also continue empowering and educating people, and then also having sustainable and funding for all the projects we are doing. Our ask is we want partnership with each and every one of you. And also we have a media campaign we've been running since June 19th, and also starting September with another organization called Mzigo, where we are trying to see how we can amplify our sickle cell voices. And with that, I know that we'll play a video just so that you can see. What we are trying to do is make sure that we come up with a sickle cell anthem, a song that unites all of us and our voices. Yeah, so these are some of our partners that we work with. We try as an organization, and we partner with everyone. So you're all called on board to come and partner with us. And yeah, those are some of the activities that we do. Some faces, you can see them. Some people I met this year in April. Yeah, so it was really nice to meet people. And that's what Dr. Caroline loves doing. This is last year when she came. She loves giraffes. So you're all welcome to come and visit Kenya. And thank you. So you can play the video so that people can see the song that we're playing. This is something we are doing with ASH together with other organizations, just to see how, again, can we amplify our voices and come together as we use media.
I will rise again. I will rise again. I've got hopes, I've got dreams, and I will rise again. I will rise.
Have you ever suffered sickle cell anemia? And while your neighbors slept at night, 3:30 a.m., you are being prayed for by your mother, crying, Savior, please give my child one more chance to make it through this night, I beg ya. My life was given to me against my favor. Dear sickle cell anemia, you are not my God, you're only in my blood. My parents made a mistake, I probably not, but who am I to judge when God is love? I was made out of love, with pains I bear the cost. Then an angel whispered, you are the puzzle's final pieces. You are the sacrifice so your family could be completed. 1 out of 2 babies don't make it out of the clinic. I've been a success story since the day of my delivery. Sometimes I cry on my pillow, sometimes I tell myself give up, sometimes I wish my miracles guaranteed somewhere in Shiloh. There are superheroes out here giving bone marrow donations. I wish it didn't cost millions of nairas for operations. I met a new friend who once asked, so it's true, are you dying? You going soon, you don't look like what you're going through. I said I'm only going through life, and no one comes out alive. Until then, I walk around with my scars, shoulders high. I was born different, I'm God's favorite, I'm God's favorite. To go through the hardest was God fitting him. In the sickles of slavery, I found bravery, I found a dignity gold, I found Laker, I found hope that cannot be shaken. The dreams of a sickle cell child is very valid. I'm a light to the planet ignited, I'm a powerful force, I'm magic. My purpose is a reminder to never take life for granted. It's like playing in the Olympics of death threats, but I triumph. No, it's equal, but I'm destiny's child, a survivor. I'll rise.
I will rise again.
I'll rise.
I will rise.
My dreams are valid. This one is dedicated to a sickle cell child.
Like my East Africans would say, asante sana. Thank you, Eunice, for your beautiful presentation. Cannot wait to collaborate with you and continue to do the work and push forward the work that you're doing. I want to say thank you to all of my panelists again, Shifnis, Kiwanuka, Eunice, Biba, and last but certainly not least, Muyiwa Shoyoye. Thank you guys so much for allowing me moderate. I am leaving very soon, but it's been such a pleasure. But my good sickle cell sister, Dima Hendricks, is going to guide you through the rest of today. Bye.
After